Welcome to Python introduction. I actually, before we start at all, I want to get a sense how well you guys know Python. Who here has used Python or has any knowledge, even just hello world? I looked up. Yes. Okay. So a little bit, yes. Oh, okay. I read a book. I have used Python in the past, but I use Java now. I made a game. You guys are already, why are you even here? Okay. What kind of game did you make? Aiden or Beep Aiden, if you prefer. Pinball. Okay. That's a classic. Now, I guess the next step for you is to combine with what you learned about AI to make the computer figure out the optimal strategy to conquer pinball. That's another classic example. Roblox, I actually don't know what that is. Make a survival RPG pixel. Okay, perfect. Well, then I guess for my experience, looks like you guys are already having, or some of you have some exposure, but for the rest who are completely new to Python, I want you to be rest assured that we're gonna start from the very fundamental of Python. The reason, and I hope that those who have used or learned Python before can really, try your best to get your head into the fundamentals, because my experience is, and of course, I started learning Python in adulthood for, work or research purpose. And what I found was while I was able to write codes and, solve actual problems, play with data frames, I always find myself Google the most fundamentals. I feel like some of you may have had the similar experience. Once you know the concept and you know how to write certain codes, from time to time, you even have to go back to, the internet. How should I write this syntax or this function? What variables I should put in this function? Or even as simple as what bracket I should use. Should I use bracket? Should I use parentheses? Why did I get this error? And so on. So I find myself benefiting a lot, even while I was preparing this class or the winter camp. The fundamentals are so important. But we're gonna make it fun because it's winter camp. And so let's get it started. All right, who is Python for? People who are new to programming. I believe some of you, don't be shy. I'm also, not the pro of Python by all means, so we can learn together. People who already know some programming. So for example, me, I started with MATLAB because during my pursuit of doctor degree that I would briefly talk about later, I was using MATLAB all the way. I want to get a sense what other languages do you know for the class here. I remember someone said Java. Have you used any other? Well, you have a long life ahead of you. Don't worry about it. Um, okay, what other languages do you know besides English, Mandarin? I mean, computer languages. I did Java, Python, HTML. Okay, cool. So web scraping, I suppose Beep Aiden, you can do like a bag of word search, that kind of thing. C
为什么
plus
我 click 啥你都得冲过来？我就看看你需要，这就听他说。
Naomi, do you mind turning off your audio? Perfect. But only when you answer a question, feel free to. Okay. All right. So you guys are exposed to C++. That's a surprise because I know you guys are what, 6 to 12 grades, and I feel like C++, C, C# are kind of my generation thing. And now everyone's onto Python and R and so on. So I'm a little surprised to see C++, but that's, the foundation. Oh, wow. Okay. Just casually flexing here, Beep Aiden. I'm grade 5 and I'm already onto Java. Oh, great. Okay. Okay, perfect. So if you already know some programming, Python should be a lot easier for you because you get a sense how computer works, and you know a little bit loop, you know a little bit if and or, so that's benefiting. Who is Python for? 0 to 130 years old. I don't know who the oldest person is in the world right now, but that's for everyone. In fact, 80% of professionals worldwide that use programming for work. So what I can tell you is Python, by all means, is not an entry language or a language that you learn so that you can get to a more difficult language. What I can testify is, for example, right now I work in finance. And my client is the biggest banks or some of the biggest banks in Canada, and they are actually migrating to Python if not already using Python. And when I was doing my doctor research, we were using MATLAB, but some people were also using Python, because Python is just so much easier in some cases if you're familiar with it. So by all means, Google, Facebook, these people, they use Python most of the time, unless they have other needs, like Java, if they have web-based developments. So Python is really all the way language. So it would be very, very beneficial for you to get on it. Everyone here knows that it's a winter camp just for 3 days. But we will get into, the introductory Python that I'm gonna run for 10 weeks. That's the official, step by step that I'm having here, that you will learn, all these fundamental items like lists, tuples, dictionary sets, all the way to pandas, data frame and NumPy, reading and writing files, and all these fundamentals, covering all bases basically. So here, and then we will have advanced level of Python taught by another teacher. And so, yeah, stay tuned for these classes. Coming back to a little bit of self-introduction, my name is Lavi, and my last name is Lee. You can call me Dr. Lee. If you find it a little bit cold or rigid, feel free to call me Lavi. No big deal. So I went to Peking University. I don't know if that means anything to you, but it's one of the better universities in China. So that's where I got my undergrad, and I study biology there. So if you're interested in biology, you can ask me questions offline. And later I went to get my doctorate degree in California, and specifically in the city called San Diego. I don't know if anyone has ever been there. It's a beautiful city. And I got my doctorate in neuroscience. So basically study the brains. I got to see the brain fire, neurons fire under microscope real time. And I use computer programming to train the animals. I use computer programming to analyze the data, find a pattern, find the meaning of the brain, activities from the chaotic, firing patterns. So that's basically what I did for my doctor. And then currently I work in this large consulting firm called Ernst & Young. And so, as I mentioned, it's specialized, my specialty is in finance field. Also some teaching experience, but, you have your own judgment. So that's a self-introduction. And, if we were to sit in a room, I would love to see your pretty faces and ask you to talk about yourself and so on. But I understand that, it's online. and y'all are shy except for Alex. So, you know, but I try to call, I'm thinking we can call your names for quizzes or questions just to make sure you are still in front of your computer at all and tuning in. Okay, so that's a self-introduction. What I'm want to put here is a statement issued by the Python community. So it's a diversity statement. As I alluded to at the beginning, some of us are not so, pre-exposed to computer programming. Some are. And I want to say that the Python community is diverse and inclusive in that it encourages participation by everyone. Our community is based on mutual respect, tolerance, and encouragement, and we're working to help each other live up to these principles. And we want our community to be more diverse. Whoever you are, whatever your background, we welcome you. And so I'm glad to be so far, I think, the only female or girl teacher among the AI Python teachers in Victoria education. But I'm glad to see some girls in this group, and I want to see more, both boys and girls getting interested in computer programming because, we're just also smart out there. Why not? Why learn Python? This is also important to go through because first, I have talked about it's the fastest growing and top 3 most popular programming language out there, period. And it's #1 wanted language among the most in-demand skills in the job market. So nowadays, when you apply to a job, I think it will be a few more years for you. If you say you know Python, that will be more powerful than you say, let's say you know C++. No offense, it's a very cool language. But in the job market, people who are not as smart as us, they recognize Python. That's kind of the reality here. It's clean and easy, intuitive to learn. No problem, Aiden. So we will go through that later. So the housekeeping, we can do it together. Don't worry. The language is clean and easy, intuitive to learn. So I was modifying this slide while we were going into the class. So for example, Python, if you want to print hello world, it just simply says print hello world. If you know Java, then you know how Java would do, right? So I have this here. Let me see if I can. All right, so this is Java, this is Python. Java. Okay, then so my computer is a little bit slow because I have multiple things going on here. Okay. All right, I see this sidetrack, heated discussion in terms of what to download before or after class. Don't worry about it. We'll go through it together. And then, so abundant packages open doors to different sectors. Like I said, the community is, they want to be more diverse and helping each other living up to the principles. So direct reflection of it is that Python is open source, is free, and you have all these packages you can download directly from the web, or actually it's not even downloading from the web, it's importing. You can directly just import all these packages that people have written up around the world, and huge support community and resource pool online. Anaconda sounds like the Walmart version of Python. All right. What will we will learn from this winter camp? Two small fun projects. So this is okay. So here is what I envision how we're gonna go through this winter camp. We will have a project. So let's say here, what I have it handy here. The first project is to print Christmas tree. Okay, so for those who already know Python, you're like, what's the big deal? You can have a tree as small as 3 layers, let's say just like plain color, or you can add color to it. From there, you learn how to import or packages to color your tree. And from, printing different layers, you learn how to loop. And then if you want to define a function like what I did here, you can change your tree height. For example, here I want to print a tree of just 10 layers. I can print a smaller tree. If I want to print 20 layers, what I did, and then you print a bigger tree. So this is a tree that I just wrote up right before the class to show you that you not only can change the tree height, you can also add other things. I wanted to draw a gift box under the tree, but here, because I was lazy and time crunch and all, so I just added the word gift here under the tree. So from here, you can, through this project, you can learn all kinds of fundamentals. And from there, you can draw some very fancy trees. I believe you guys are fully capable of drawing better trees than I did. But that's how we learn fundamentals. And so whenever we encounter a category of knowledge, in order for us to unleash our potential to draw better trees, we will take a pause on the project and we go to the fundamentals. So what I mean by this is that, for example, here we have the Christmas tree. And so we talked about fundamentals. Oh, and we need to loop to draw different layers. Then we go to loop. And then we learn the ABC of the loops together. And so everyone is comfortable. Everyone's comfortable. And we come back to loop the tree. So does it make sense, everyone? So that's how we're going to do it. And I want to take our time to go through the first project so that we have all the fundamentals comfortable. And then the second project would be design your own game. I put the example of tic-tac-toe here, but I realize it's a little bit too complicated. So the code would look like this. And then so it's a lot to go through, but I can send the code later. You see, this code is long, and for people who don't have the prior knowledge, it may be a lot. So I changed the plan to a number guessing game. So again, this is a framework where you can really expand and develop your own other guessing games. And fundamentals, we're gonna learn through these projects: strings, conditions, and branching, if and or, and then loop, and function. Define your own function. And so here the color code black is, this winter camp, and then gray is Python intro course. And so I think your parents would know that we have advertised the course will kick off January 27th, and it will be on weekly basis, I believe on the weekend for 10 weeks. And so we're going to cover, the rest of the fundamentals. Okay, here is what y'all were heatedly debating what to do while I was talking about important philosophy. But anyway, here we are. Have a working Google account. Does everyone have a working Google account? Or who doesn't have a working Google account? Please, thank you, Alex. Please let me know if you do not have a working Google account. Yes. Yes. So perfect. Okay, thank you. Perfect. I love this participation here. Okay, let's see. I actually don't know what that is. educbe.ca. Okay, I'll tell you the purpose, and you can use your best judgment. The purpose is that we can use the Google Colab. So here, if oh gosh, this banner. How do I get this banner? That is making it worse. All right, here. Okay, perfect. So Google Colab. Okay, as long as if you Google Colab and you click on okay, I believe it's this one. So if you look at my screen at this icon, as long as you can open this one, open Colab. Okay, as long as you can see this screen. So Wei Lian and Alex, and Aiden, who else said they have? Yeah, so Aiden, Wei Lian, and Alex. If you can, oh, okay, okay, perfect. So as long as you can see this Google Colab, why we use Google Colab is so it doesn't work. Okay, so as long as you can use this page, because this page, what it can allow you to do is that it can real time, basically it has, in a sense, Python installed in the background. Or, if you know the concept of Python kernel, and then they can run Python. So for example, here, if I do file, new notebook, and immediately you can see this new notebook where you can start typing code. So Alex, I believe you have Alex phone. I'm not talking about Alex E. So Alex phone, do you have a account? Are you able to see? Perfect. Okay, so let me know if you cannot use the Colab. I do not like this banner at all. Okay, here. Let's just drag everything down a little bit. Perfect. So let me know. You can message me if you don't want to, let everyone know. Feel free to message me directly anytime if you have something not working. I want to make sure, we're a small enough class. I want to make sure everyone have a good time and feel like they're able to engage at any moment. So I want all of us to be, that's fine. Yeah. So as long as you can, that's fine. Aiden, if you can, let's say print, I have access, and then you can run. Then that's fine. The initial code, I think it will be a little slower. Okay, so Aiden, you can continue working on creating an account and let me know whenever you caught up. And we can proceed at the same time. Yeah, just message me if you have trouble. Otherwise, you can use, if your parent, any one of your parents has Google account that you can use. Or if actually if you have Python, you can also just follow at the same time with your Python IDE, whatever Python software you have. So here is a Google Colab window that we will use. And so in the files I sent you, which is, I believe, if I can go to my drive. Folders. So these are the files you're able to see, I believe. And so here, what you can do is, if you have downloaded the file, you can click on the left side, new, this plus sign, and then file upload. And you can upload from your local, let's say what I have here. And then you can click one, and then you can open. And then that's how you upload. If you already have these in your own Google Drive environment, you can click one, and you see the three dots on the right-hand side, and you can open with, and it automatically has an option, open with Google Collaboratory. So you can open, and this is what you will see, this Christmas tree Python notebook. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so if you double click and automatically recognize as a Google Colab and then opens accordingly, that's perfect. This is just a way to open it more specifically. Okay, perfect. And so you will see a notebook, and the notebook, or any notebook for that matter, has two types of cells. One is code, one is text. So if you have prior exposure of to Python notebook or Jupyter notebook, you probably already know this. But code is, so here, if I want to add a code, then I can add a code, code here, and then you can type, And if you want to add a text, so this will be text format. If I do print, you see it's already not writing code for you. I have access. It no longer runs the code, but it recognizes it as a text. So throughout the process, we will have some quizzes. So for the quizzes, you can directly use the files I gave you as a playground. So for example, here I have, I believe here I have something open already. Okay, perfect. So for example, if I have loop and, content, oh, you have a quiz. I believe your workbook doesn't have it because I don't want you to see beforehand. And so you can, quiz, and you can add a code. You can click on this quiz text box. If you click add code, it will add directly under it. And you feel free to, type your own code or whatever. Yeah, and at the same time, for all the contents, if you want to, for example, here I'm teaching range, and you can just change on top of it. Just if you're curious, feel free to do so, but make sure to, change, let me change this runtime to Python 3. Okay, so feel free to change the code directly, but not on the files directly in the share folder. Please make a copy to your local. Service not allowed. So Aiden, do you have, so when you open that website, what do you see? So when you open this site, what do you see? Does anyone else have the same message or warning saying that service not allowed? Okay. Um, so if you Google, okay. So Aiden, if you Google Colab, what do you see? Colab. Right. And then you click on this one, second Google Colab. And you see this one. And then is that where, okay. And then you click open Colab. Ah, okay. School account. You will need your own account, I guess. Okay. So, Aiden, if you have a parent, oh, okay. So yeah, you need to have a Google account. So it seems that Aiden is the one that has this issue. So we will proceed, and Aiden, meanwhile, please start a Google account. Use your establish a Gmail account, or I already forgot how to start a Google account. It should be very quick. And then as soon as you have a Google account, make up an email, you will be able to catch up. But at the same time, I will proceed with the rest of the camp. And Aiden, you can always come back and watch the recording. I hope that's okay with you. And if we come back to the Google Colab, I believe everyone so far is. Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, Python community's spirit is already kicking in this camp. I love it. So use it. Yeah, I think everyone is comfortable here, or you are familiar with the code and text, these two different cells. And you can always, here I want to move it up. So you can see move up and down. I don't like this cell, I can delete, and so on. So I will give everyone a few minutes to get familiar with the Google Colab before we move forward. All right. So if everyone can go to the share folder, I share it with you, and find the Christmas tree notebook. And if you have had a copy, please either upload or open in your Colab your copy. Otherwise, make a copy. You can download or just copy into your drive, your own drive, and then open a copy. So the reason why is I don't want this folder to be changed or the file to be changed. I believe you don't have writing rights, but just in case. Okay, so if you have the Christmas tree open, it should look like this. That's our first project. Okay, thank you. Perfect. So project 1, draw your own Christmas tree. You can see the objective here, write a function that takes in an integer. So objective 1 off the bat is write a function. So what does this function do? This function has a variable that takes in an integer as the height of the tree. And what does this function do? Print a tree pattern with various symbols. Don't worry about this various symbols part. So it's a function that takes in a variable and does a thing. And the second objective is the tree trunk always has a height of 2. So of course it's not rigid. You can always change, here, for example, I have changed my trunk to adding some gifts. So what a height of 2 means is this trunk here. Design and decorate the tree however you like, utilizing the knowledge you have learned. So here is where you can go nuts. January 7th, which is, I believe, this weekend, this Sunday, we have a showcase. You can use your imagination and the knowledge you learned to decorate the tree however you want, generate a tree, and present to everyone. So January 7th is a showcase of the winter camp, what we've learned, and this third objective is where you can shine. So I just want to make it very clear here. Design and decorate the tree however you like, utilizing the knowledge you have learned. So the knowledge you have learned will be 3 parts: loop, function, string operations. Loop, function, string operations. And so whenever we encounter any of these knowledge points, we will jump to the loop, function, string operations notebook and then go through the fundamentals like I mentioned earlier. Okay, so the Christmas tree, I believe we have until 12:30. So we will continue until 11:30 and we will have a 5 minutes break. So 11:35, we will resume until 12:30. How does it sound to everyone? And Aiden, if you haven't had a chance to create an account, feel free to do so during the break. All right, thank you, Molly. So here, we set up a scene. Write a function that takes an integer and prints a Christmas tree pattern with various symbols. The tree trunk always has a height of 2. So let's start from the beginning. If we want to forget about the trunk, let's say if we just want to print this pattern. So how does it work? You can see here, we have 1, 2 spaces, and then 1 star. However, spaces after the star doesn't matter, right? You just want the computer to print spaces and star and stop at the star. The computer doesn't know you want a tree or however, right? So we only care about the spaces before the star and then the star. So the first row, you have 2 spaces. And the second row, you have 1 space, 3 stars. Oops. And then the third row doesn't have any space, you have 5 stars. So that's a tree with a height of 3, right? Height meaning the rows of the leaves. And then increase to 4. Here you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. What am I saying here? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, because I have 1 space here. Okay, so you have 3 spaces. That's just to avoid any confusion. All right, so now we have 3 spaces in the front and 1 star. And the second row, 2 spaces and 3 stars. Third row, 1 space and 5 stars. Fourth row doesn't have any space. For those who are very quick in math, you can already construct a sequence of numbers in your head in terms of each row, how many spaces you should have and how many stars you should have. And so subsequently, in of a height of a tree with a height of 5, you can have n minus 1 space starting from, and then we'll see how many. And the row number, let's say the row number 2 times the row number minus 1, right? So that's the odd numbers. that is second row, it will be 2 times 2 minus 1. Third row will be 2 times 3 minus 1, and so on. So here you can see once we establish these two sequences, we want to construct a kind of a loop logic so that when it moves on to each row, it can automatically print number of spaces followed with the number of stars, right? So now we come to the loop function. So here, what the loop can do is for if we predefine the tree with height n equals to 5, then we have for I, we just arbitrarily define an I in range n and print I. So what it does is it prints 0 to 4. So here is the loop. If you don't have any prior knowledge of Python, here are a few new things that you immediately notice. We're defining a new variable and assign a value to the variable. And then here we have a for loop defined, and this I has never been defined before, and on the fly, it's defined within the for loop. And then you have the question, what is this range? What is range? And then for print, how come you early on printed in quotations, and here you don't need to print any quotation? What is it printing? And then last but not least, why do you print 0 to 4 instead of 1 to 5? So with these questions, we go to the loop. And then here, if you have the notebook open, here you will see the loop light notebook. Does everyone have the loop light notebook open?
Can you wait for us?
Okay, perfect. I take silence as a yes. Okay, so for this loop, this lesson we're gonna go through, we will teach what is for loop, what is while loop. What's up, Lilian? Okay, I'll give everyone a minute. Okay, sorry. Thank you so much. Let me know, please. Give me a shout out if I'm going too fast. Let me know when you have it open. Okay, perfect. Perfect. Thank you. Thunder. Perfect. Thunder is cooler, Sherry. Okay. So we'll talk about for loop. We'll talk about while loop. While loop, I would say, is kind of optional here because for tree specifically that you will show off on January 7th, we use for loop. And for loop, if you have prior knowledge, learned from C++ or Java, while is a little, wild. That for is kind of better controlled. So what I've seen predominantly in the real world, for is much more commonly used loop. All right, so actually, now that I think about it, this is a good cutoff point to, I don't want to, we go into the lesson and suddenly, time up, we need to take a break. So let's take a break here and come back 11:25. How about that? Let me just leave in the chat. 5-minute break. Come back 11:25. All right, please come back at 11:25. stretch. Who's back? Is everyone back? Who is not back? Raise your hand. Bonjour. Je parle français. Everyone is doing great. Oui. Très bien. All right. Everyone is doing great. To reward you, here's a cute cat. What time does class end? 12:30. Travel is forced to be the TA participating. Okay, you can go. Thank you. The cat is not a prize if you draw a good Christmas tree, unfortunately. It's a he. His name is Truffle. I have two cats. This one is cuter. The other one is sweeter. The other one is Boba. Truffle, yes. Boba is black, and so for those who know boba tea, you get the connection. Okay, loop. Thank you. Aiden, I do want to check on you. Where are you now in terms of the Google account?
I still have to create my account because I have to use my parents' Gmail to create an account, and I'm still creating it. So basically, it might take a while.
Okay. Thanks for the update. Glad to know you have an account. So, meanwhile, you can kind of just keep an eye on the lesson, take in the knowledge, and you can always, practice. Now that you have the notebook, you can practice with step by step later. Loop. Okay, to warm up our brain again, we talked about, it doesn't let me create. So William, you mean it doesn't let me create account? You don't have a Google account? So if you have a trouble creating an account, you can oh, okay. Because of age? Google is not as inclusive as Python community, apparently. But I guess for security reason or content. So Wayland, you can follow the same strategy as Aiden, in terms of okay, it worked. Okay, perfect. Loop. So for loop, we'll talk about for loop and a while loop. And so first of all, for the for loop and while loop, a commonly used function is called a range. And so this we also saw early on. So before we discuss loop, let's discuss the range object. It's helpful to think of the range object as an ordered list. So for now, let's look at a simple case, range 5. So it would generate an object. If you just directly run range 5, it will give you an object called range 0, 5. So for example, here, range 3, it will generate range 0, 3. And so, however, if you run this object generated, which is the meaning behind the range 5, oh, it still gives you range 5, 0, 5. So I guess you have to use it. That's right. So let me recover. So range 5, it will generate range 0, 5. What does it do? It will show up later. So when we actually use the range. And what is a for loop? And so here is a silly illustration, but it helps us to understand the logic of it. let's say you have, you know, 5 different colors of square, and using the Python convention, it always starts with 0. So we're basically indexing each color, right? So the first square is indexed as 0. I actually don't know why. If anyone knows why Python starts with 0, feel free to share with the group. But that's kind of the way it is. It always starts the first as 0. So in the future, when we learn, data frame, actually, no, some languages, Python is I'm most familiar with MATLAB, and it recognizes first row as first row. So for example, MATLAB, if you use MATLAB, let's say I'm just using here, a 1, 2, it will grab the first row, second column object. Whereas in Python, this will be the second row, third column object. You know what I mean? Oh, Java is okay. Good to know. Okay, so basically it starts with 0, and so these are indexed 0 to 4, and then now we want to replace square 0 with a white square. So then, because all these 0 to 4, we call this list squares. So 4 square 0 in squares, square 0 equals to white square. So what it does it do is 4 square 0 in squares. Actually, the compiler is recognizing if square 0 is in square at all, right? So 0 is in the squares, and then square 0, whichever square indexed as 0, would be replaced with white square. And then don't worry, this is not actual code, so this is just logic behind it. And we can do the same thing. 4 square 0 in squares, 1, 2, 3, 4. Every time when it loops to the next line, the computer checks if the square index is in fact in the list of squares. If it is, the index square would be assigned with a new value, in this case, white square, right? So then if we translate to codes, so squares, we have a list of strings or strings of characters that indicate the color. We will learn about list in our official Python introduction class, and it can get pretty confusing. So here you just take it take my word for it. Square and a list of colors. And for I is the index of the squares in range. So this range here, as early on, range 5 or range 05, it's interchangeable in this case unless you put more things in the range. So for I in range 05, what does it do is the first number is the starting point of the range, and the second number is the total number of integers in this range. So what I mean is, let's say range, let's say 0, 5, 0 is your starting point, and 5 is the total number. For I in range and then colon print I, you will see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 because the range starts from 0 and it has a total of 5 integers, continuous integers. So now if I start the range with 1 and then 5, what will happen is it starts with 1 and then stop. Sorry, I misspoke. This is not the total number of items in this range, but it's the integer, or the index. So the 5th item is indexed as 4, so it stops at the item that's indexed as 5. So for example, if I have range 1 to 6, it will print starting from 1 all the way to the range all the way to the number that is indexed, the sixth item that is indexed, which is 5, because it starts with 0. So you can always think it as it will stop at range and the number -1 because it starts with 0. And so here, for I in range 0 to 5 squares I. So when you have I in range 0, 5, the first number will be what? The first iteration of the loop would I equals to 0, right? No, it cannot be negative. It can be negative. We'll touch upon that later. I see rumors spreading in the group chat. Okay, so but for now, follow me. For I in range 0, 5, the first iteration is I equals to what? 0, right? We saw early on here for I range 0 to 5. The first iteration is 0, and then squares 0 equals to white. So square 0 is red at the moment. And now you use the one single equal sign to assign the value white into red, right? So now it's assigned white. And then you do the iterations, the next iteration, I equals to 1, and you assign square 1 as white, and so on and so forth. And so, for example, here, by the last iteration, I equals to what? 4, right? It's the 5 minus 1. So the last square 4 is blue. Now you assign white. So after this 4 iteration, all the squares are assigned with the value white. All right. So this is the quiz. No Google account. Yeah, Aiden, I'm so sorry. So this Google account preparation was communicated before the class to parents. So the assumption is we come in with Google accounts, but yeah, so there will be recording. So Charlene here as our coordinator will post a recording to the WeChat that I believe all of your parents are in, and so you can always watch the replay. And so for Car, do you have a question or okay, no problem. I'm not here to point fingers. I mean, this first section is relatively light, and you can always catch up with the recording. And hopefully tomorrow, we come back in with Google accounts and Google Colab. We're all ready to go. So that's the goal. Don't worry about it. And then on that note, sorry, just to interject our existing flow. This second part is highly recommended, can be done after first class. So this is, early on someone said Anaconda sounds like a Walmart version of Python. It is true in a sense. Anaconda is a navigator that has all kinds of commonly used apps and from Anaconda that you can launch. So for example, this Visual Studio Code, it was not in Anaconda's default product. Unlike Jupyter or Spider, I believe the Spider IDE, yeah, here Spider is the default Python IDE, but Visual Studio Code is not. So I separately downloaded Visual Studio Code, which has some advantages over Spider. But if you prefer Spider, by all means, keep using Spider. And so after you download Visual Studio Code, Anaconda, after you restart Anaconda, it will automatically recognize you now have Visual Studio Code or VS Code, and you can launch from here. And so when you launch Visual Studio Code, it looks like this, and you have a bunch of functions and so on. And so the reason why I say this is recommended is that you now have your offline Python development environment where you can explore to your heart's content. But it's not required because, for this class, we are using Google Colab all the way. So I recommend it because in the future, if you want to continue to learn Python with us, you can do whatever you want with your offline Python. Okay, so in that sense, Aiden or William or whoever not having accounts, you can, on the side, if you have Python, you can feel free to type, you can start with a new file, and then you can just, I put it here. You can just start typing. For example, here we're doing 4, and you can in range, yeah, and so on and so forth, right? So you can learn alongside. Okay, so we went through this for loop. And one thing I forgot to mention is this indentation. In Python, one simplicity, and I find it very beautiful, is that it doesn't require semicolon or any kind of symbol to register to tell the compiler, okay, I'm changing a line or I'm changing, the for and sometimes you see very complicated codes that has 10 layers of for loops, and then you lost track, which which part of code belongs to which range and so on and so forth. But in Python, it's beautifully solved by using indentation. So here, for example, this Python code, it does not have any line, it does not have any symbol after each line that is telling the computer I'm changing a line, but instead you have to have indentation. As soon as you have an indentation, it recognizes that something is going on. You're either changing a line or you're going within a loop or something. So in other words, let's say if I cancel this indentation, the computer recognizes an error. You can see this red here, that if you already have an if, then next you're going to do something within this if, then why are you not having an indentation, right? So then you're supposed to have one, and then the error is gone. So here, same thing for loop, and in the future when we learn like function and if and all these operations, once you set, you start a logic. So here is a for loop logic. Whatever you do within that loop is indented from this for. So this is very important because otherwise it will have error. Indentation. Okay, so now we have gone through a very simple for loop. Here is a quiz for you. For x in range 0, 3, print x, what would be the output? You feel free to paste in the chat, or you can type in your workbook. So again, what you do is you can add a code. Okay. All right. I see some correct answers. Thank you. Okay. Okay. So question marks. Yes. So here I have this code ready for x in range 0. Okay. So when the computer reads 4 and it reads a range, first of all, the range 0 to 3, what does it print out? So range 0 to 3 starts with 0 and stops at the number that has that is the third number, sorry, the index of the third number, which is 3 minus 1, which is 2, right? So you start with 0, end with 2. It will have 0, 1, 2. And so the computer reads that you want a loop in the range of 0, 1, 2 with a variable. What do you do with this variable? At each iteration, it prints it out. So it meets the first iteration, which is 0, it prints out 0. And then it goes on to the next iteration, it prints out 1, 2. So if you run it, it will look like this, 0, 1, 2. Right? So this is an easy way. Even in my work, I can tell you that when I'm uncertain of a range, what am I defining? I always use this method to print, because in the future, I can tell you, you will have encounter very complicated for loops. For example, you would have a data frame that is, let's say data frame equals to data set X, for example, and then you have data frame, data frame variable 1 equals to, I don't know, class, and you assign to something, right? A or df1, so on and so forth. And then you have like, you have all kinds of complicated, so var1 equals to something, 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 very complicated. var2 equals to something, something, very complicated. And then you have range in var1, var2. And so at that point, you want to make sure you're defining the right range, because it will no longer be as obvious as today we learned 0, 3, right? So it's always a good method to have a quick check. For X in range, print X. What if I want to make it a row? Okay, let's try Patrick's method. End equals to this 0, 1, 2. Look at that. Thank you, Patrick. What about no space? 0, 1, 2. What about end with haha? 0, haha, 1, haha, 2, haha. So now we know end in the print, this end declaration, or this variable or parameter within the print function, gives you the space, whatever you want to put in between each iteration. Thank you, Patrick. Patrick is the TA at the moment. All right, we learned something new on the fly. Look at this. Anyway, so back to 4x in range. Suddenly this looks overly simple, right? But yeah, so it prints 0, 1, 2. Like I said, it can get very complicated, and printing is ultimately not what we want to, like when you build a robot, you don't want to print a robot. You want to do things within the loop, right? So this is just a quick check. What is each element in your range? All right, the second quiz, a little more complicated. 4x in ABC, print x plus a. What would happen? So this has a little bit of string operation knowledge in it that we will go through later. But for now, let's see who can. So far, I haven't seen correct answer, but nice try. I see your thought process. So for those who say ABCA, the spirit of the loop is that it does the same thing within each operation. So the same thing is 4x, and then first iteration it encounters a, it has the a plus a. So in other words, first iteration, it is asking the computer to print a plus a, right? second iteration, print B plus A, and so on. Ah, okay, all right. I see you're getting it. So it's AA, BA, CA. In terms of string operation, we can cover later. Don't worry if you don't know why. We can also just do this. We can see what happens. So it gives you space, right? But if you just do plus, there's no space. It's that. And let's use Patrick's fancy method. And equals to, let's say something. Aha. Okay, so that's that. Abaka. Okay. All right. So I think that's the idea of the loop that we're getting it. Let's try to use a for loop to print all the years presented in the list dates. So the dates have 3 items, 3 numbers, and then n equals to the length of the dates. So here is a new knowledge point, which is the len function, which is very powerful. It grabs the length of the list. So for example, here, let me just copy this part alone. Okay, and then we generate n equals to 3. So while the index of the 3 numbers, as you've learned, is 0, 1, 2, the length is the objective length. How many items are in this list, right? So it's 3. So now suddenly you realize you no longer need to know or manually count the length of the list. Let's say tomorrow this list is 300 and I don't know, 327 items. You can directly use n equals to len list to get the total length. And then suddenly you can use range and just put n here to go through the entire list. And so here what it happens is for I in range length of the list, which is 3, print dates and the index. As you can imagine, it's this. Let me know if something doesn't make sense here that we can discuss. I want to be aware of everyone's level and pace, and please don't be shy if you have any questions. Okay, so here, what does dates mean and why square brackets? Great question. So dates is the list here. We will go through the details of lists and then this whole thing will make a lot of sense. But here we're printing the dates, which is this list, and the square bracket means the index. So here, for example, dates, and the Python is sensitive to, suddenly we're doing this. Python is sensitive to capital letter, small letter. So make sure it's identical. Dates, 0. What is dates 0? 1982, right? So dates 2, which is the third one, 1973. So for example, here we define grades. And then you have grades 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I don't know if anyone is this high and still sit here through winter camp. I would be very impressed and happy. Then you have to have grades. And then here, let's do a quiz. What would be grades 5? Whoever asking this question is encouraged to answer. Molly, what do you think is grades 5? So it will be, so the first index is 0, right? So grades 5 will be the 6th number. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got it. All right, perfect. We're on the same page. Thank you. And then we can move on. All right, so this is an anime that, or animation, that explains exactly what I was saying, what's going on. And you can already see here that it's making a mistake, this anime here, because it's capital letter D here. So I don't think in real life this will give you an error. So this should be a small letter D. But you get the gist. Example of a loop, printing in the range of 0, 8. We have gone through this, so it will be 0 all the way to 7.
Oh,
Okay. I take it as a very loud yes. And then for years in days, I think days we have defined before. Sorry, this was a little back and forth, but the dates since we have defined, that's another interesting thing about Google Colab. It registers all the codes you have run before. So the dates you can see here because I ran this and the dates are registered. And so here, but that's the whole thing. Yeah. And so before you can see that we're using I, we can define this as I, but not, it doesn't have to be I that indicates the index. It can be something that actually makes sense to you. For example, in this case, year, right? Okay. And so here you can see for year in dates, print year, and then year, year, year. Okay, so we can move on to more complex, but it's the same example as the color square we had before. Squares, that's a list that includes the list of colors. And for I in range, let's upgrade this. Let's make it len squares. How about that? 5 is cheating because we already know there are 5 colors. What if there are 100 colors? So for I in range len squares, print before square I is square I, and square I is assigned to white. Print after square I is square I. What do you think this is doing? Okay, so let's say for I in range len squares, the first iteration I equals to 0, right? So we grab this red. So I grabs this red square. Before square 0, because I is at the first iteration is 0 is, and then this thing is the value of the I indexed square, which is square 0, which is red, right? And then in this loop, we're doing 3 things. The second thing is square 0 is now assigned as white. And the third thing is after square, and then again, the same I doesn't increase or decrease just because you're proceeding as line by line, because in each iteration, everything under each iteration has the same value for I until this iteration is done, and then I is increased, moves on to the next item in your range, and then go through this whole thing again, no matter how many lines under your for. And then the next iteration, it comes back to the next item in your len and go through all the codes with the same value. So what happens is the first iteration before square, and then it prints I as 0 is red. After square, 0 is white. So you can see here, let me just removed all the space so it looks better. Okay. And you can see this is exactly what I was talking about. However many lines under each iteration, the value I is always the same. Until everything under this iteration is executed, it moves on to the next iteration. And now it's 1, now it's 2, 3, 4, and so on. Does it make sense? What's the difference between range and length in this code? So length gets, let's see, length gets that one value. Length squares gets one value, 5, right? And then range 5, what is range 5? Range 5 we covered it, it's 0 to 4, right? So now all it does is replacing this variable or parameter for the function range with this chunk. So now length squares is 5. So let's say list length. So let's call this list length. So now list length is 5, right? Because it grabs the length of the list. And then range list length. Right. So if I break down with this intermediate, maybe it's more obvious for you that you assign something with the value of len squares. So len is a pre-built function in Python. I didn't define it. So Python automatically recognizes when you type len, parentheses, you're grabbing a length of a list or length of something. And then this something is now 5. And then range list length now is assigned with the value of 5. So here, all I did here is compressing these two lines. Conveniently, skipping the intermediate, I just directly put this whole chunk into range. I hope it makes sense. I see a whole bunch of TAs. I love it. Okay. So now, okay, now here is a additional knowledge, which is a powerful function. Again, just like len, this function is pre-built in Python. It's called enumerate. What enumerate does is that it returns two outputs. One is the index for each iteration, and one is the value for the iteration. So here, for example, what I mean is for squares and so on and so forth, 4i square. So here, I no longer use the function range, but I use enumerate. And the Python, once it reads enumerate, it expects two things to be returned to each iteration of for loop. So then what it does is for the first iteration in enumerate, it prints the index and the value. And the second iteration index value, and so on and so forth. So you can see that enumerate is a very powerful tool that can return to you the location and the value within a list. Does it make sense? So 4 is, let me think how to. Can you explain? Does this part make sense? Yeah, this is just something I guess you have to memorize, that it's called enumerate and it returns two things. So let's use a quiz to practice. For ix in enumerate ABC, that's the list, right? So here enumerate squares, I can also do like enumerate, replace it with a whole. It's not. So enumerate, it's equivalent to this, right? It's the same thing. So I just replace it with squares, the name of the list. Okay. So what is for ix in enumerate ABC, print ix? What would be the output for this one? You got it. Yes. Molly and Kian, you got it. So it's the index and the value, right, of the list in enumerate function. Okay, perfect, Sherry. Okay, I think we will skip the while loop and go to some quiz. Let me see if it's all for loop or okay. Write a for, this quiz is in your notebook and I have the answer below, but please try your best to not look at the answer and write your code. I want every one of you to actually type, get your hands dirty and write a function. I can't see when you make a mistake, so feel free to make as many mistakes, but I hope you can write it out. So write a for loop that prints out all the elements between -5 and 5 using the range function. Okay. So it will be what, for range? What does elements mean? Oh, elements is just each item in a range or list. So for example, the element you can call these, each item is an element in the list dates. So all the elements between -5 and 5 would be -5, -4, -3, all the way to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. -4, 5, print I. Is it good? Oh, I knew it. I guess, yeah, I guess what I, okay. When I wrote this, what I meant was between -5 and 5 exclusive. But here I made it inclusive. Either way, I think we got the knowledge point. Okay. Good job, Molly. I want to see more people saying they got it rather than other than Molly, Kian, Alex. What about Yuka? What about Elsie? Steven, Bojun, Botao, Huayi, Matthew, Lucas, Naomi. You quiet folks. Okay. Why is it -5 or 6? Or if back to the answer I put below, if I want to make it exclusive, perfect. In range -5, so exclusive between -5 and 5. Recall what I said, the first number is in the range function is the first number you want to generate, right? So that would be -4 if you want to start with -4. And the second number would be the number you want to stop. However, unlike the first number, which is the actual first number you want to generate, the second number is the number you want to stop at +1. That's just a weird thing you have to remember. I did -7. It's okay, as long as you get an idea. Okay, so you can always come back and revisit this. Print the elements of the following list, genre. Make sure you print the elements of the following list. Okay, so we'll just go through this together. There are multiple ways of doing this, right? Okay. And the key is for genre, right? Or G, genre in genres. How about that? Genre. What does it do? It prints out. Or, so this is item in list or elements for each iteration or each element in the list of elements, directly print out the element. Or you can do print for I, right? For index in range genres. Print what? Genres index, right? This also works. I want to list both for genre in genres, print genre. Or, so there are two ways of doing this. What is the difference between these two ways? I guess that's too long of an answer to type in the chat, but I hope you can appreciate the difference. One is range, correct? So one is operating on the index. So an index in a range of numbers. So here entirely we're recognizing the location in a list, right? So you want to print out this index, this needle, as the needle moves down the list, it prints out the item where the needle is pointing at in this list, right? This first method is directly printing in the list and then printing each item as the item or element moves down the list. So either way it works. In real life, what happens is sometimes you have, all kinds of fancy process to generate the index as the needle moves along your huge data set. You're more familiar with the location or your process to generate the location in your data. Otherwise, if you're more comfortable with the elements, the actual values in your data set, you print the actual values. So either way. Yes. Okay, I think we're good with loop. Good enough to come back to Christmas tree. That's a long segue back to this project that we're actually doing here. So now this is a child's play after what we went through, right? Recall that what we wanted to do here is for each iteration, we want to print the right number of space followed by the right number of stars to generate the tree, right? So the first sequence here vertically is the space 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. And then the second sequence is 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. So first we need to know how to generate for each iteration these correct numbers. So n equals to 5 for I in range. 5, we went through it, it's 0, 5. Now we want to inverse it, right? Similarly, use a loop to print 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. This is a comment, Wei-Lin. Whenever in a code box, you add a sharp or hashtag, it's a comment that the compiler would automatically skip. So here I left a comment to challenge you to write a loop that can generate 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Did I say sharp? Pound or hashtag. Okay. All right. So that would be inverse would be easy, right? And if you want to do for I in range n, I guess n we already defined as n equals to 5, right? And then you have 5 minus, and then for each iteration, the first iteration is 0. So 5 minus 0 minus 1 is 4. And the second iteration, 5 minus 1 minus 1 is 3, and so on and so forth. What did I do? Right. It's math. So whatever inside this is math. And then so I think why do we need to add 0? Where, oh, because it's 0 space. If you're talking about the last line. In the future, when we write a function to print out your tree, we want the logic to be the same for each iteration. So 0 is no exception. Even for the last iteration, we want the computer to know that you're printing 0 times space, right? So which generates no space. You will see later. So 0. And then similarly, use a loop to print 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. That's the actual stars on the tree, right? The leaves on the tree. So you try this one. Let me know if you get it. Great, Patrick. So that's the first step you want to do, right? Establish the logic between the iteration number, meaning the order of iteration, or the index of the number of iteration and the number you want to print. So the first iteration, the index is 0, right? And then for the first iteration, you want to print 1, second iteration, you want to print 3, and so on and so forth. So here, for I in range n, that will be 2 times 0 plus 1, 2 times 1 plus 1, 2 times 2 plus 1, and so on, right? Okay. So why are we doing this? Why are we printing out 43210 13579? Because we want to achieve a future where we can print 43A times space plus B times star, right? So for each iteration, we want to be able to simultaneously generate A and B. So we have achieved generating the parameters or coefficients for space and star. The rest we need to do is just to print space and star. Does it make sense? Why can't you just do no? Because, okay, yeah. For any thought you have, you can always experiment. So if you just do I plus 2, right? That's what you propose. That will be that will not generate this kind of equal increment number sequence. Okay, so as we approach the end of today's session, I want to leave this teaser here for our lesson tomorrow on string operations and definitions. Because can you explain the last part again? So specifically, what do you mean by last part? I guess for this part? Okay. For each iteration, we are printing something, right? For the first line, we're printing some space and a star. Actually, as I continue with this teaser, I think it will be more clear. So here, for I in range 5, we're printing, forget about stem. So we're not looking at stem, so that as not to confuse you. We're just looking at the body, right? For I in range n, let's say, what did we do here? We're printing this logic here as we're printing 43210 for space, right? So this is n minus I minus 1, right? So we're doing n minus I minus 1, right? So that's this part. Times, so this is a multiplication. That's why I say this is a teaser, because we will go through what's going on in this bracket and more the next class. So here, this is a coefficient. Let me rewrite this so that it's much better. So for I, let me make the indentation clean. To answer your question, we're defining n minus I minus 1. That's the coefficient for space, right? And then next, we want to print a coefficient for star. Let's even put this space as just actual space. So when you print, the computer recognizes this space as you're printing a space, right? Then coefficient for star is what? 2 times I plus 1, right? And then what you're printing is A as a coefficient times the space plus B multiply by printing the star. Don't confuse this star in the quotation versus the star, which is the multiplication. So whatever in quotation will be printed as is. And this star outside of quotation is the multiplication. So then what's going on is for, as I ran here, it generates a tree. Print this many space followed by this many stars. Perfect. And then we add the stem, which is just 2 stars that you will think about why it's. So let's define n. It's 5 here. So 5 for I in range 2, because we want to just print a stem of 2 layers, right? Print this many spaces that covers all the space before the center, and then print a star. No, the multiplication it doesn't need to be defined. It's pre-built. So here, let's just do, 5 multiplied by 2 by 3, 15. So that's kind of, yeah. And then divided is all pre-built. Right. So we're familiar with multiplication with numbers. Here in Python, the wonderful thing, as you see here, is multiplication even works on strings. So here, if I want to print, let's add a new one. Print, yes, times 5, right? Yes, yes, yes. And then if I want to print yes space, it prints yes space 5. And then if I want to add an exclamation mark at the end, yes, yes, yes. So you notice here, either single quotation or double quotation works. So here, if I just do single quotation here, it's the same thing. However, you cannot do divide, I believe not. It'll give you an error. And you can do yes plus, so you can do multiplication and plus yes. I don't know if you can do minus, it will give you an error, right? So it's rather intuitive, if anything, I would say. Okay, perfect. So to recap with 1 minute left, what we did was setting up the Google Colab environment for you to, without installing Python software, to have a platform to actually run Python however you want. And then 2, we learned loop, the entire for loop. And importantly, we also, embedded a little bit knowledge of list. We have different ways to loop, and we learned the index to move the needle in each list. And then we're able to generate a simple tree that is 5 layers. And then next class or tomorrow, we will learn the string operation, where we learn systematically what strings are, all this multiplication, plus, and so on. And we will also tackle function so that you can define a tree that print however high you want. I'm printing a big tree here. Let's see if we can print 100 layer. Okay. Oh, that's too big. Okay. Anyway, you have this 100 layer tree here with a tiny, tiny stem. Okay, I think we're at the time. I will stop share and I will see you tomorrow.